This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Well, welcome everyone. It's Thursday. It's 6 o'clock, unless you're listening to the podcast, in which case it's Friday. It's 4 o'clock, unless you listen to it on Saturday, in which case it's Saturday. It's 10 o'clock. You could also be listening to it on Sunday. Apologies. It's Sunday. It's 9 o'clock in the evening. What the hell are you doing listening to a podcast at 9 o'clock in the evening? You should be getting stressed about the situation that's about to occur, which is a week of teaching. But don't panic, because I'm here. My dulcet tones will be here for the next hour and a half, although it might feel like 3 hours. Who knows? You could slow it down or speed it up and make it 3/4 of an hour. And I'm going to lull you into a full sense of pleasure and joy in this recording as we talk about things that have been interesting to me, that hopefully are interesting to you. And we are counting down, aren't we, for 2 more weeks until Easter, apart from certain areas of Warwickshire and Aberdeen potentially, where they've got 3 more weeks. And in some ways we're grateful, in some ways we're a little bit jealous, because we know that they're going to get a slightly better price at Centre Parks. For now, though, I should introduce myself. I'm Stephen Lockyer. I'm at Mr. Lockyer on Twitter and basically everything else. And I'm really excited to be here this evening talking to you about the different things that have caught my attention, that have given me interest over the last, I would say, 4 weeks since I last did my last show. And I'm really excited to be sharing some of these ideas with you. I'd love some feedback. So if you are listening, please do get in touch and let me know what you're thinking, how things are going for you. I've put a poll out on Twitter regarding one of the tasks that we're looking at today. I've got some regular features. We've got some new features as well. A little wander along a local area, as well as some amazing quotes from a brilliant book, frankly brilliant book, that I read recently. So let's start off with a feature we call Appy Teacher. So Appy Teacher is a very, very simple concept where I talk about an app that I think is absolutely fantastic. Now, I'm wondering whether I could have come up with a better pun than that, but we'll cope. My last recommendation was for Notion, and I got quite a lot of response from people who do like Notion, do listen, do use it, do enjoy it. I would say that I probably use it 4 to 5 times a day. It's brilliant for teaching, brilliant for life organisation. And I've just started using the calendar. And the way that I've been using the calendar is to set myself a little workflow. So I was saying that I need to do something, giving myself an hour. So I saw this concept called time blocking, and it's supposed to be the most efficient way for managing your productivity. And I've read all sorts of things about managing productivity. And I'm just curious to see actually how much it does work. And time blocking is basically you make appointments with yourself. So you write down what you've got to do. And you book those times, saying, it's going to take me about an hour to do that. I'm going to block that. And I'm trying it out, seeing what it's like, seeing if it's effective enough or not for me. So I've been using that with Notion, and I would recommend Notion to you. It's basically a note-taking device on steroids, effectively. But the one I'm going to talk to you about today is one called Otter, Otter. Now, a lot of apps have a freemium model, and the freemium part is quite annoying. So freemium, for those who don't know it, is basically when you have an app that is essentially free, but it has some restrictions, and those restrictions are designed to gently aggravate and irritate you into buying a subscription for it. Now, Notion, for some reason, is incredibly generous. I think it's going after the enterprise market, i.e. businesses, organizations. But for humble old individuals, I haven't got to the end yet. I haven't got to the limit where it's telling me I've got no space left, and so I'm wondering whether I am ever going to get to the message where it says you are now limited. But until that point, I'm doing fine, and I haven't had to pay for it once at all. It's about £10 a month, but I haven't had to pay for it. And I've got a few files here, a few elements that I could just completely delete, and I'd totally manage without it. But the app I am going to talk to you about is one called, I apologise for my creaky chair, it is one called Otter, Otter. And it's one of the most fantastic devices that you can use. It's an app that uses little internet, i.e. the phone, and then you can look at the information on big internet, i.e. a computer or laptop, and you can get the information that you have processed. Now, it's stunningly simple. What it does is you can dictate to Otter, and then it types up your dictations with an amazing level of clarity. In fact, I have found it only struggles with names, as in non-conventional, and by that I mean ethnic names. So names that wouldn't be in the normal American dictionary. And you can dictate for up to 40 minutes per day. 40 minutes per day you can dictate for. Now, I again have never got to that limit, despite using it extensively. So how might I use it? Well, I've used it before to come up with lesson plans. So if you've been asked to write some lesson plans or lesson overview, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can speak faster than I can think. So it's a really, really good way of practicing the technique of talking your lesson plan aloud, and it types it up for you. So you can literally plan your lessons, cut and paste that into the planning folder, the planning file, in minutes, and it's far faster than typing it up. The second thing I've used it for is when I've got a student and you have to write lots of reports when you have a student teacher. I use it to make notes on the student teacher. It's really, really fantastic for that. So you can look at the criteria on your computer, open up Otter and start dictating out all of the areas that you need to cover in your report. And it can produce, as long a report as you need according to how much you can speak. The third thing I use it for, and this is probably the biggest value in terms of time saving, is and we do love them, don't deny it, the annual report. So at most schools, in primary schools especially, you have to write a report. Even if you've gone to a school which does a lot of tick boxing, a lot of statements drawn, there will always be a thumbnail sketch of the pupil or a character assessment of the pupil. And I dictate this. So I look at the child's name. I've got them to fill in a questionnaire beforehand, so I know roughly what I want to cover. And then I record the statement about those children. Really, really simple to do. It takes very little time at all, and it saves a huge amount of typing. I get incredibly frustrated having to type up endless reports, and yet, as you'll have discovered, I can talk for England. So I'm able to dictate the reports for the children, and that works really, really well in terms of getting the information out of my head and onto the page without the hassle of having to type it and make loads of mistakes, because I am someone who does type fast, and I've noticed that my habits have become worse in recent years. So, for example, I'm unable to spell the word to. I keep on typing ot. I don't know if that's common or not. But I would recommend Otter, Otter. You do need to download it. I think it's on Android as well, but the logo is 5 blue lines that are the outline shape of those letters, a little bit like a sound wave. As I said, it's free to use. You can upgrade, but you get 40 minutes per day free. Now, two things that I haven't used it for, but that it builds its business model on. Well, one of them certainly, and that is meetings. You see, with Otter, you're able to record a meeting, and it's fairly good, I'm told, at distinguishing who is speaking. So if you've got a meeting with 3 people, as long as they're fairly distinct voices, and it's very good in its level of distinctiveness, easy word, you can have the minutes typed up So essentially, word for word, what people have said with a bit of correction. And the editor is very clever because you can go through it. And if a word doesn't make sense, you can actually play that word and hear exactly what was said. So you can get essentially the script of the meeting, which is brilliant, very, very useful for teachers, perhaps in your appraisal, or if there's some form of capability issue that you're concerned about, or if you've got difficult conversation, you're perfectly within your rights to ask if you can record notes to review afterwards. I think that's totally legitimate to ask, but you must ask. And secondly, it can create a summary of that meeting. So it can analyse what was discussed in the meeting and comes up with, again, another little précis or paragraph summary bulletin for what that meeting was about. And it's really clever. Now, I first discovered the summary by doing the character reports that I mentioned earlier. And in those character reports, it brings them up and it identifies the child's name and then does a little summary of what I said of the children were like. And the summary was actually really accurate. So, I mean, what it does is summarize what I have said, so it should be fairly accurate, but the summary itself read well. The last thing that Otter is useful for, and I know that certain people have used this, is if you have a lot of notes to make at the end of the day as a busy and harried head teacher, say, for a safeguarding and pupil concerns website such as CPOMS, then you can also dictate these notes. It's a SSL secure website, which means it's secure as your emails. So long as you're using a good password, it's perfectly secure. And, well, excuse me, I say that, it's as secure as you would hope it to be. And if you do have to make lots of notes for CPOMs, it's brilliant for that. Really, really effective and really helpful. So worth exploring. So that is Otter, Otter. As I said, I would recommend it. I'd give it a lot of encouragement, and I'd be very supportive. If anyone did use it, then let me know what you think. Hey, we've all done it. Rushed to the staff room to make a cup of tea, then taken it back to our classroom, forgotten about it, and then drunk it, cold and overbrewed. Well, now, don't even have the hassle of going to the staff room. Simply drink Colt. Colt is a cold tea alternative. It's literally cold tea, but without that tangy metallic taste of those cheap beakers that you use at work. Colt. Drink cold tea brewed by us. So that was a message from one of our sponsors, Colt, Cold Tea. Many people have said that it's nicer tasting or more pleasant tasting than Huel. Not really a measure, but we'll go with it. Now, we're always trying to solve problems, aren't we, as teachers? And here is one of the problems that we're going to try and solve today with your help. So without further ado. Copper bottoming. So Rodney Copperbottom in the brilliant cartoon, animation, should I say, Robots. Rodney Copperbottom had a message. It was see a need, fill a need. And I think it's a really interesting one because we are very good at trying to solve issues around ourselves in classes. And one of the issues that we have in primary especially is stationery. Now, in secondary school, sometimes you'll read online what feels like horrific stories about teachers getting incredibly cross, that children haven't got the right stationery or stationery being checked and measured. And there's an element of concern in terms of draconian issues and levels of intrusion there. Whereas in primary, we tend to think, let's give them the material so that it doesn't hinder their learning. It's an old school philosophy, but we might as well go with it. So it's worth exploring because with that comes its own hassles. And the hassles are that you will start the day with 30 pencils, 30 pens, 30 rulers, 30 glue sticks, and end the day with maybe 20 pens. 2 of the pencils would have been broken, 3 stolen. The glue sticks will have had a variety of things done to them, mainly that the lid will click. And I'm fairly sure that the person who comes up with a glue stick that doesn't dry out will be a millionaire. And the rulers will have been snapped, even though they are shatterproof, because they are doingable and slappable, and they are mini swords, so they will be used like that. And I'm not talking about reception. This goes right up to year 6. So I have asked online what the solutions are, and I have had various solutions in the past. One that was very popular a few years ago was to number and name all the items of stationery, so the children have all got a numbered item. And that solves some problems, but it involves a lot of handing out and collecting in. Some schools do pencil cases, clear pencil cases, and that's a good solution for trying to solve problems, because everyone has their own stationery that they have to look after and have to store. And finally, I've seen online that people will name the glues and give them a name, and I mean, it's personification, so it's a 2-in-1 experience, isn't it? By naming the glues and giving them names, there's a hope that the people will be a bit more responsive and looking after them. My issue with that was that they gave them elderly names, so it was very, very British anglicised names. So Ethel, Margaret, Arthur, Mildred, the sort. But much as that amused me, it's not hugely inclusive, is it? And I'm thinking especially about classes where those names are unfamiliar, because no one in their family or any of those relatives are called any of those names. So it's quite a misnomer to think that these are an accessible thing, and that it's a little bit of an in-joke. So I'm wondering whether we should explore a more sensible route, but I'm not sure what that route is, and I haven't sussed it. And it's one of those ones that I'm still frustrated by. I think probably pencil case is the easiest way to go, clear pencil cases. But that doesn't stop the scourge of children borrowing things because they haven't got something. I think it would need a monitor that gives out the pencil cases and collects them in, and the pencil cases have names that the children look after and store. But it certainly does need solving. Now, I asked on Twitter how people solved the pencil case issue, and I've had a few responses. And one person said that they probably wouldn't get away with it these days, but they used to charge a very specific deposit for borrowed stationery. And the going rate was 1 shoe per item, and it worked. So, yes, it probably wouldn't get away with it these days. It is interesting, the things that 10 years ago were acceptable and fine that now would be concerning or challenging, and that you might be reprimanded for. The culture has changed slightly. And it's very, very strange, because some of the charm of that playfulness has been removed, I would say. I'm going to give a case in point that some of you might be horrified by if I share this with you. And it is that 20 years ago, I had a class of infants that were obsessed with my socks. And so I would be sitting on the teacher chair, the children would be sitting on the carpet, and they would drift closer and closer and closer as I'm teaching them, reading to them, and so forth. And they'd play with my socks and play with my shoes and be fiddling around, basically. And you can say this as many times as you like to infant children, but they don't quite get the message of personal space. They don't quite get it, which is fine. So I came up with a solution, and my solution was this. I got 2 of those £1 shoe sponges and got the children to clean my shoes. And I said that I would choose 2 children who were sitting sensibly to come and clean my shoes. And of course, it was a device, wasn't it? It was a way for me to ascertain the children that hadn't participated, that needed to sit near the front. And so I would seek out the good and seek out them to come and sit at the front. And it was a twofer, because I not only got my shoes cleaned, but I also got those children who are more reticent to come to the front. And that's really exciting. That really rustles my crow. I really do love the fact that I had a very small device that got the children toward the front of the classroom. As I said, I don't think you'd get away with it today. Get away with tells me that it probably would have been frowned upon, potentially even then. But thus is the life of a butterfly teacher. You do things and you experiment constantly, and that's a brilliant thing to do, I would say. Someone else put that they just keep replacing it, which helpful. That's not going to solve it. Someone else has put, in short, we don't. So many pen orders, which I feel their pain. And someone else has put. So this is, I should say, they're contributors there. So Andrew Jeffrey put the first one about swapping shoes. Andy McHugh says about replacing them. Mrs. Betty's Books says, in short, we don't. So many pen orders. And Mrs. Mo English says, owls have to hand something of value over if they forget stationery. That's interesting. That goes back to our shoe item. However, if a whiteboard pen runs out, if they recycle in reception, they get a free replacement. That's clever. So they use recycling there to actually help them out. Now, I'm really, really hoping that we get some more responses to that. So I'm just going to put it out again, and hopefully we get some more responses, because I really would love to hear some more responses to see what people do to tackle that situation, because it is enormously frustrating. So if you do have a suggestion, if you do like the idea of coming up with a contribution, I'd love to hear from you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the radio link in a Twitter post and share it. And I'm hoping that people will respond and join in. But if you would like to participate, then simply find me at Mr. Lockyer on Twitter. Sorry, not Teacher Talk Radio. And let me know what you think about the idea of how we look after our stationery. What can we do to look after our stationery? How can we get the children to not lose their stationery? What can we do to support children in taking responsibility for their stationery? And how can we tackle it? How can we tackle it? I'd love to hear your ideas. Love to hear your suggestions. So that is an element I've called copper bottoming. So it's searching for ideas, coming up with solutions. And we're very good at coming up with solutions as teachers, I would say. I think it's one of our greatest strengths is to solve something. Anyway, that is copper bottoming. Love to hear from you. Teacher hacks. So this is another regular feature of this show where I talk about one of the things that I've done that has really helped my life as a teacher, and that is that of the dashboard. Now, I do love a dashboard, and I've moved jobs recently and started building up a new dashboard. A dashboard, for those who don't know, is a collection of links for all the programs, apps, and websites that you regularly have to access. And I would say it's one of those things that you need to build up. And if there is someone who's very techie on your teaching team, if they build one up and share it, it will almost certainly work for you. So let's say when you're in a primary school that you have probably 8 or 9 website logins. So there's going to be one for a maths website, a resources website, all those sorts of websites where you have to log in to get resources. You will also have school-wide websites, for example, CPOMs, your email accounts, those sorts of things. And you'll have year-based ones as well. And then there will be the apps that you use regularly. So, for example, I don't use any webcam software. I use a webcam test website. because it literally broadcasts what's on the webcam, doesn't add any bloat, and it's incredibly fast. Like, whatever device you're using, if it comes with some software, I'd recommend you don't use it with your webcam, or just use a webcam tester. And that goes for a visualizer, document viewer, anything like that. Just use what is actually provided for you online with a webcam test, because it's brilliant. Full screen, no hassle at all. Very, very fast. So I use that an awful lot. And rather than having lots of favorites or a large, long Chrome toolbar with lots of tabs open, I very simply made a grid on a Google Doc and gave it titles, and the titles were mine, school, year, class. And every time there was an account for something that I needed to have, or a website that we needed to visit regularly or irregularly, I would add it to that. So you basically would type the word, let's say it is school visits. There's a school visits website. On your dashboard, you would type in one of the boxes, school visits. You'd go over to the school visits website, log in, and you go to the top, which is the URL address, the website address, the full thing. You right-click and copy it. Then you go over back to your dashboard, and you select the word school visits, all of it. You click on Control K, which is to add a link. And you click in the white box and paste in the URL, so Control V, and you click on Apply. And in very little time, you have a toolbar that you can use every day, relentlessly. At home or at work, you've got access to it the whole time. It's especially useful for those emails that you get where they say the membership or the subscription has run out, but I've got here's the new password. And you think, oh, well, I used that in the autumn term, so I don't need to worry about that now. And then I promise you, come the autumn term, if you hadn't added it to your dashboard, then you'll be searching through emails, searching for, who was the person who sent that to me? How can I find that email account? So you do all of that, that merry dance. The dashboard gets rid of that. It is just such a fantastic way of accessing websites that you use all the time. It's very, very effective indeed, and I'd really recommend it. I think it's a really good use, and it, especially for those mornings in teaching. So I'm someone who likes to get in as early as possible. Why? Because a minute before the children arrive equates to 30 Earth seconds, and I think that you need to listen as clearly as possible. And look carefully to the amount of times that people are contributing to the dashboard, if you'd make it a shared dashboard. But I would recommend that you make it personal, make it just for you, and instead share the template, share the document itself. Now, I'm just curious, because we're about a third of the way through, about what's in the news at the moment. So I'm going to play one of our sponsors, and then we'll listen to the news. So let's hear from one of our sponsors to start off with. Food Fling, meal kits designed by teachers for teachers. Simply grab the Food Fling bag from your fridge, throw it in the microwave for a couple of minutes, then pour the baking hot ingredients straight into a bowl, where you can eat it at leisure whilst falling asleep watching Netflix. Pour any remainder into that strange Tupperware container you've got hidden at the back of the cupboard and take it into work the next day. Food Fling. Just interested to know how many teachers actually use, I'm going to say apps, but it's not. It's websites like Gusto and the other food subscription boxes. Food Fling is designed for teachers, so it's very specifically food that you can microwave the next day as well, hurriedly, to possibly to disguise the smell of the re-microwaved Chinese that sometimes people bring in on a Monday, making you both hungry and jealous. But that's Food Fling, one designed specially for teachers. And I've got an offer code that I can share later on. If anyone's keen on that offer code, remember, it's food that's really, really quick to make, that you can eat from a bowl in a slump, and also you can microwave the food the next day. And now it's time for the news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This week in the news, is World Book Day a burden on parents? Has the tide turned against hyper-discipline in schools? Is Scotland going to be excluding more students? Should we be talking up the benefits of going to school at a school that is turning the clock back on mobile phones? World Book Day on March the 7th has become a fixture in the school calendar, where pupils are encouraged to come to school dressed as their favourite characters, or bring books to donate or tell their friends about. This celebration of reading, though, has become a little controversial, as reported in the BBC and The Guardian. Parents have complained of increasing pressure to buy commercialised costumes or spend time and money elaborately creating their own. Some of the pressure has a class element, with some parents sending their children to school dressed as characters from Harry Potter, while others might be the Artful Dodger. Head teacher Fran Davis from Michigan Primary School in Mountain Ash has said she wants the day to be fun without being a financial burden. Therefore, she suggests that pupils can come in their pyjamas, suggesting their favourite bedtime book, or simply in school uniform, as they might be pupils at Hogwarts or even Greyfriars. If you wish to hear teachers' views on World Book Day, listen to last week's Late Show with Lucy Newberger on Teachers Talk Radio. One of the most significant developments in education in the last few decades has been the trend towards positive discipline, or military-style discipline in schools. And this provides the context for the next two stories this week. The first story appeared on the BBC and was covered by the Guardian newspaper. And it's about the Michaela School, led by the controversial head teacher, sometimes described as Britain's strictest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, who has been in the news for the school's policy towards Muslim prayers. Half of the pupils of the school are Muslim students. 2 students have given interviews where they describe a toxic atmosphere of the school and an atmosphere of fear and being stripped of their identity. If you wish to learn more of this story, you can find Tom Rogers' interview with Catherine Birbalsingh on this topic on Teachers Talk Radio. The increasing prevalence of Tiger-style teaching, strict discipline methods, zero tolerance, and first-time, every-time expectations of students across British schools was highlighted when a parent at Boston Spa Academy complained her autistic son found school intolerable, as over a period of only a few days he acquired 56 negative comments and several days in isolation. Boston Spa Academy schools have appeared frequently in Education Uncovered and other news outlets for their strict approach involving lining up for inspections and an expectation that rules will be obeyed instantly and at all times. Not for the first time, teachers' unions have described these policies as inhumane. This week, Scotland's Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth announced that there would be a review of Scottish Government's policy on exclusions. The number of exclusions from schools has dropped considerably in recent years, as a determined policy of avoiding school exclusion was adopted following research of a link between excluded students and later involvement in crime. However, with 1/3 of teachers in Scotland reporting in a survey of the EIS union that they had suffered assault or physical violence in the previous year, pressure to review the non-exclusion policy has resulted in a reconsideration. School attendance is once again in the news. A survey revealed that nearly a third, 32% of teachers and school leaders have experienced pupils being absent this academic year because of a parental dispute with the school. The survey, by Teacher Tap, asked 8,411 teachers and leaders in state schools in England in January what reasons they had been given for pupils missing school this academic year, other than illness. More than half, 51%, said pupils had been kept home because they were tired after an event the night before. Nearly 9 out of 10, 87%, said wanting to take a holiday during term time was the reason, while more than 3 in 4, 76%, pointed to family events. John Camp, president of the Association of School and College Leaders, warned in a speech to the union's annual conference that the unwritten social contract between families and schools is fracturing, and he called for a change of tone in the national conversation about education to ensure that people talk up schools and colleges. And finally, another story from the BBC, where Milldown Academy in Blandford Forum head teacher Mr. Law has adopted the policy of providing brick phones, old-fashioned simple mobile phones for students. Parents can hire or borrow them as an alternative to smartphones, which are increasingly distracting in the school. You can find more discussion of these and other stories on Teachers Talk Radio, or reviewed each Sunday on Teachers Talk Radio panel, which you can find the links to on YouTube or the Teachers Talk Radio site. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with John Gibbs.
Hey, we've all done it. Rushed to the staff room to make a cup of tea, then taken it back to our classroom, forgotten about it, and then drunk it, cold and overbrewed. Well, now, don't even have the hassle of going to the staff room. Simply drink Colt. Colt is a cold tea alternative. It's literally cold tea, but without that tangy metallic taste of those cheap beakers that you use at work. Colt. Drink cold tea brewed by us. Food flu. I do apologise. We got a little slip of an advert there. I do apologise for pushing food flu yet again, but I do have that discount code, and it is 5UCK3R5. 5UCK3R5. Now, something that has been really interesting me recently is the excitement of a certain tool by secondary teachers. So I wonder what's in the doc. In the doc. So this little moment of the show is basically an interesting critique about whether something is a good thing or a bad thing. And I had noticed recently that secondary teachers especially were getting incredibly excited about this revolutionary new thing that they were talking about, and people were saying it was game-changing, and the lessons were completely radically different to before, and it was increasing the engagement and everything. And I looked a little closer and I discovered that it was mini whiteboards. And I think as a collective nation of primary teachers, we looked quizzically at ourselves and wondered what had been missing for secondary teachers, that they didn't realise that mini whiteboards were actually a thing. It is interesting that sometimes I think that we're the forgotten echo of education, despite coming first, like the proverbial chicken, because certainly we've been using mini whiteboards for probably 10 to 15 years successfully. I'm not sure what miracle cure they're suddenly having on secondary, but they've been like a main staple, I would say, in primary for that length of time. I can confirm through bitter experience that the plastic formed mini whiteboards, the ones that that aren't made of cardboard, the ones that are actually plastic, they don't dishwash. It shouldn't be a surprise, but I did try it once because whiteboards do end up with that thick grey, soupy, scratched coating, which is very, very frustrating, quite hard to remove. But they don't dishwash. It is worth trying. You do need a good cleaner, and often, I have to say, a slightly scour-edged green sponge and very liquid or any other washing up liquid, which has got a dispersal in an element of it, is one of the things that's fantastic for removing the grime off the whiteboard. We've been using them for years and years, so why I don't understand why there's such a surprise for them. And I'm just hoping that I've got a little list of things that I really would like to see secondary discovering, which we use in primary day to day. So first up on the list is pens, because we spend 7 years training our children to write neatly. We try our very hardest. We do handwriting lessons, and then it seems at most secondary schools, if it emits ink, it's allowed. And whilst I'm very pleased that you're supporting the BIC and biro industry, getting handwriting pens can make such a significant difference when we're trying incredibly hard in primary to try and make the clarity of the children's writing beautiful and crisp and clear and refined and joined and cursive and regular. It seems that a child could write on someone else's back using the entrails of their soup, and that would be deemed acceptable. I can't quite understand it. It's very, very frustrating. The second thing that we use in primary that they might not use in secondary school is the awe and wonder that is practical equipment. So we don't just use practical equipment on our open days when primary school children are visiting. We use it all the time, especially in maths, and we try wherever possible to use practical equipment. And I'm basing this on my children's schools, and I'm totally happy to be corrected by other secondary teachers, secondary colleagues. But as far as I'm aware from the things that my children tell me, practical equipment is never used. And I don't know if there is a suspicion that it will be used and damaged or broken or abused. But I think that mini whiteboards is probably the edge of sanity for some secondary teachers, and they prefer as little as possible to come out. So what are the advantages and the disadvantages of mini whiteboards? Well, the thing that I really like about them is the temporary nature of the answer. I think it's fantastic that the children don't have to commit to an answer, because it gives them a chance to have a go. And we're always talking about building resilience and building risk-taking, but there's a permanency, even writing in pencil in your book, a permanency that some children can find incredibly uncomfortable and dare I say, unnerving. Whereas a whiteboard has a temporary nature, so the answers are also temporary. They are written in sand, if you like. For the teacher, it's brilliant to be able to see, to scan, and it's incredible how quick you're able to do this as a teacher, to scan the whole class and see exactly what sort of input they're putting in. And also, it's one of those things where you can see a wrong answer insanely quickly. Like, I have never realised how quickly I was able to identify the wrong word or the wrong number. But in fact, with a blink, you can almost identify where someone has gone wrong. It's a really good assessment tool in that sense. And there are lots of things. There are plickers, I think they're called, which show barcodes, and the children have to hold them the right way up. But there seems to be a lot of front loading with that app, that you have to do an awful lot of training the children. And in terms of training the children, a whiteboard doesn't need any training at all. You literally give them a pen and they write on it. So the downsides in the guilty section, the downsides for the mini whiteboards and whiteboards themselves is that they are an absolute pain, because you only use them for a small amount of the lesson time. I certainly do, because of course there is a level of suspicion that if the children have not written anything down, they might not have done any work. So some people end up photocopying or taking photographs of the whiteboard work for evidence, which seems insane. But it is the culture in some schools. I don't know why. I can't understand it. Perhaps they just want to emphasise that they don't trust the teachers, which I think is fair in a climate where it's very easy to get a teacher. I think that creating a level of distrust of them is a cracking way of recruiting and getting teachers on board. So, yes, in terms of the fact that you only use them for a small part of the lesson, they are quite cumbersome and take up a huge amount of space. They are also a constant sketchpad for the children to be doodling and drawing on, which can be very frustrating. If you're asking the children to concentrate, that's not helpful. If you're asking the children to take notes, brilliant, perfect for that. In terms of doodling, they're also perfect for that, which is quite frustrating. Another thing that's very irritating is that you're giving the children a thick black or blue marker, a pen for them to draw and doodle on, so the ink can stray, can be quite frustrating. So it goes back to copper bottoming again and how you manage and look after those resources that you have in your classroom. Do you give out the pens? Do you collect them in? Do you have whiteboard monitors? How do you manage that situation in your school? I'd be very interested to hear what you do. I tend to have everything given out at the start of the day and then collect it in as soon as physically possible that I know that's not going to be used again. So as soon as people aren't going to be using that stationery, gone. I swipe it back as quickly as possible. Anyway, let me know what you think, how you actually manage your tools, how you manage your whiteboards and how you manage your whiteboard pens. But I think that they can stay. They just need managing. Hey, education content publishers. We know what it's like. You've got some cracking slides, but they're just too short. Well, worry no more. We can now offer slide bloat. We can add extra slides, add click-ins so numbers fly in and fly out, up to 20 actions per slide. Get that boring old deck of 13 slides up to 46, so it's more than a minute per slide. Really frustrate teachers, but justify your cost price and make those slides really bloaty. So that's a advert for slide bloat. I think that quite a few companies are using it now. Actually, it's really good to see. Because why would you use a 10 slide deck in your lessons when you could use a 46 slide deck? And why would you have just one slide with one graphic on it that just sits there when you could have 19 graphics that slide in, zoom out, fade, vanish, disappear, swirl around, and otherwise distract and confuse, interrupting your teaching flow? I think, in all seriousness, if you're going to use slide bloat as an educational publisher, that's great. But if you're not, I'd be really grateful if you could offer 2 slide decks. The first slide deck would have all the whizzy flying in and flying out for people who get very excited about that. And the other slide deck would be a pared down version with the minimum information possible that helps you to teach. And I would say a hour-long lesson probably only needs at most 6 slides. And I'd be concerned if you've got more than 6 slides. It is possible to do it all on one slide. It takes some planning. But it's very tricky to do if you're part of a team. If you're on your own, then it's very possible indeed. But otherwise, yeah, a bit more of a challenge. Now, we have had some people responding to the copper bottoming, but mainly it's agreement. But let's find out what Matthew Connolly thinks. Copper bottoming. So this is about looking after our stationery, how you get the children to do it. So Matthew Connolly on Twitter says, kit to each kid with a hair bungee to hold the bundle together. Pencil cases became an arms race of fluff and sequins. Personal responsibility for your own kit. Partner checks. Store in room trays with names on drawers. It's a really nice, elegant solution. And one that's actually very, very functional because you can have someone can check it quite easily, partner checks, hair bungee to hold the bundle together. That's a really nice idea. Very quick elasticated join system. I wonder if there is something in that we can use. I'm just thinking aloud here how we can actually manage our stationery more effectively. I'm going to ponder that, because that is possible, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Matthew Connolly, for getting back to me on that. Very interesting to see how different people manage different things. It's really, really worth finding out what other people do with that.
How do you get parents off the WhatsApp groups and onto your school messaging service? Use Zing Purple. We know that you like to dumb down your messaging to parents, so we just use emojis. Use Zing Purple. When dumbing down couldn't get any worse.
Now, one of the news features that we broadcast earlier on, about 20 minutes ago now, talked about World Book Day being a burden and onerous on parents. And it's worth considering, because there is an expense, and I would say potentially two expenses for World Book Day. The first being, hopefully, a book, and the second being a costume. And one idea that I can't remember where I saw it from, so I do apologise if this was your idea, the provenance of which I should have declared or written down. I can't recall. But about a week before World Book Day, this school did a bring and buy sale of costumes. So they did a costume sale. So parents were able to bring their costumes, old costumes that the children had got, and they were able to sell them. And I just thought that was such a clever idea. Now, I don't know how the school made their money in terms of whether they sold the items and there was a 10% cost or something like that. I don't know. But I thought it was a really, really clever way of actually getting the costumes out for a really, really cheap fixed price. So making costumes accessible. Because we do know that they are, of course, probably not the most environmentally friendly costumes. I know that they're very synthetic often, not very special material, and they're also not used often. I know there are some children who live in their Princess Elsa outfits, and other children who use it once for World Book Day and then it's ditched. So it'd be really interesting to see what people think of that idea. I really like it as a concept, and I really hope that other schools do that in the future. I certainly am going to share that far and wide, because I think it's a win for the school and a win for the parents and a win for the children. So that's a golden idea. That's an absolutely golden idea. Now, I had a lot of feedback on Train Station last time I was broadcasting, and Train Station is it's a teacher training program where you can find out all sorts of things and interesting training sessions for courses for teachers. So if you've got some specific tasks that you have to teach your teachers, the things that you can train them in, such as food hygiene, fire safety, and also teaching techniques. These are presented by people, experts in industry. They're often done off script in a very vibrant, passionate way. They're very interesting and easy to listen to, not at all dull. And people do like listening to them. They don't fast forward through them. And they certainly, I would imagine, don't Google the answers at the end of the quiz to make life easier for themselves. But this is one that was very popular last week, so I'm just going to play it for you, and hopefully it draws out some interest for you.
Unit 3. Attaching items to classroom walls.
There are, generally speaking, 3 or 4 types of attachment or fixment that you can use to enable your display to stay up, whether permanently or temporarily. You can use drawing pins, map pins, blue tack, or staples. I would advise, for a permanent display, to use staples. However, blue tack is an option that you can use for temporary displays. The choice between drawing pins and map pins may be a challenge for some people. However, map pins, when they fall on the ground, are quite secure in terms of treading on them, whereas conventional drawing pins will tend to stand pin upright and either embed in the heel of your shoe or be used for pranks by pupils. Therefore, we would advise you to use map pins where possible.
Well, thank you, Train Station, for letting us broadcast that valuable information. Really, really appreciate it. And now it's a part of my favourite parts of the show, which is this segment. Spineless. Spineless is where I get to share a book that I've been reading, often education linked, but not educational, if that makes sense. Makes no sense at all, Stephen. What I mean by that is that it is useful for educators. And the book I've chosen to share is a book called A Rebel Talent by Francesca Gino. And her main argument is that we're not looking for rebels as in people who are breaking the laws, people who are causing crimes, damaging property. No, we're in fact looking for the true rebels, the people who are thinking differently, improving their lot, improving their situation, and refining things that they do. And it's actually incredibly, incredibly powerful as a book. So I'm going to read you some quotes and talk about these quotes. Just need to find the page. I've got the link here. I use a Kindle, so it actually highlights all the best quotes for me. Okay, so starts with a brilliant quote by one of my favourites, Harry Houdini. "Look at this life, all mystery and magic." A wonderful quote that is. So this is the first one, and I should say that Francesca is a researcher herself, and she's brilliant in plugging her own papers, but they're also really relevant. So it says, contrary to what we tend to believe, asking for advice increases rather than decreases how competent we are perceived to be. We underestimate how flattering it is to be asked for advice. Now, that is true, and I think that the more senior you get in a school, you can be nervous about asking for advice because you should be the person who knows the answers, and that can worry you quite deeply. Like, I better not ask my advice, I better not show that I'm vulnerable here, or don't have the solution. And I think that that's a really interesting perspective about the way that people view those who ask for advice. You're seen as more competent, and I suppose what you're doing there is you're flagging up that you are unsure and you're looking for clarity. And so the signal that people are getting there is this is someone who needs support, needs guidance, and is seeking it rather than winging it. And when you look at that, those two people, when you separate that choice, you end up with one person who is happy to wing it, and one person who is happy to ask for advice to get the job done correctly, get the job done right. And I certainly know which person I would choose of the two. But it did make me think, because that is contrary to what people might view them as the right answer. As the right answer. The next quote from this brilliant book is this one, and it was about how Google recruited, and they described a advertising campaign which had a maths problem, super hard maths problem that they scattered around different places, and it was a rabbit warren type problem where it led to one place, led to another place, led to another place, and finally was you've got this far, why not apply for a job at Google? So they were looking for people who were tenacious enough to get to that point. And this is the quote. With its billboard recruitment plan, Google was looking for people who are geeky enough to be annoyed at the existence of a maths problem they haven't solved and smart enough to rectify the situation. Now, I call that in my classroom the learning itch. And I really, really love the learning itch. The learning itch is the bit where you can't let it go, you have to find out. Here's an example of a learning itch for you. And it is, child asks what a word means. You might know it, so you give a definition. Now the child might ask where that word comes from. That's a learning itch. Like, a child has shown actual interest in what you're saying. It's worth following those tangents and looking at what the word means. You can do that in Google. Find the word, you type in the word and meaning, and then click down and find out where that word comes from. Spoiler alert, it's often either Greek or Latin, French and German. Lots of words come that way, but you can uncover gold in it, and it makes sense. So I really would encourage that learning itch. Now, this quote reminded me an awful lot of an appraisal scenario. I really don't like the appraisal situations in schools. I think it's a really strange and false model. But that's my own grump about it. But this is one of her quotes. "It's a curious reality that most large organisations manage their employees on weakness." Now, I'd like you to consider your last appraisal and think carefully about your last place that you were not happy with, and whether the appraisal focused on weaknesses rather than strengths, or whether they even identified your strengths, where they talked about your strengths at all. And so they did some research. Gallup did some research, and it was this: people who use their strengths daily are 6 times more likely to get satisfaction out of their job and report less stress and anxiety. Research by the Corporate Leadership Council, sounds like a fun group, found that when managers focus on employees' weaknesses, his or her performance declines by 27%, whereas a focus on strength boosts performance by 36%. So, I mean, that's an incredible difference. It's more than 60% variance between weaknesses and strengths. The focus on positive strengths boosts performance by 36%. Wouldn't it be interesting if your appraisal was based on your strengths, solely your strengths, not the, okay, this is the school, whole school strand, so we have to have this, and this is your target for your class based on what the child was doing in completely different circumstances pre-pandemic 4 years ago. And finally, one little thing related to your subject that we decided that you should do because the other person left and we were desperate. Now that is, I would say, a good summary of an essentially most people's experience of an appraisal. Incredibly frustrating. What if it was 3 things that you were absolutely passionate about? Brilliant. You are obsessed with running. We'd like you to set up a running club. We'd like you to target the pupil premium children. Are you up for that? What other strengths have you got? What can you give the school that celebrates your great achievements outside of school? How exciting would that be if you had that opportunity? Sorry, I just got a little bit excited. Now, the interesting thing about the way that Kindle quotes work is that you can add little comments next to it. You have to put a comment, so you can select the text, and then to add it as a note, you have to write a note next to it. And some of these I got very, very excited by, and my note was yes next to that. And here's another one which says true. And I'm just going to read it to you and ask you to reflect a little bit. It says, when people quit, in fact, they're not quitting their jobs, they're quitting their bosses. Managers account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement. People don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. Isn't that just staggering? Staggeringly accurate as well. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, when I read that, I had to stop for a moment because it was such an interesting quote that really made me think. Now, I've got a few more from this book. Okay, here we are. This is another one. In one study, my colleagues and I asked over 750 employees from various organisations to think about their current job. Some were asked to write about an idea, project or workspace that they felt that they personally owned. The rest were asked to write about how they spend their days at work. After everyone answered a few other unrelated questions, we presented the winner an opportunity to help the research team by participating in a 5-minute survey without extra pay. The people primed to feel a sense of ownership were more likely to say yes. The people who felt a sense of ownership were more likely to contribute more. I think that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I really, really like that idea. Now, before I read the next quote, I want you to imagine that your head teacher has gone to a conference, and they've gone to a conference and they're really enjoying the conference. And you're really enjoying the head teacher not being there because it's really quiet for a few days. You get back on Monday, same as everyone else, and on Wednesday, the head announces a great new activity, task, resource that they've invested thousands of pounds into, that they were drawn into from a trade show sideline at the conference that they went to. And your heart sinks because suddenly it's one more thing that's been added to our schedule in the classroom without much thought. And this is a little reference here from a company. It's an American takeaway company called Pal's Sudden Service, which has got amazing ratings. And they've got this strategy, and I think it's really, really clever. It says when a new idea is proposed, adding an item to a menu, for example, or a change in the workflow, the idea is tested in 3 stores at the same time. One that supports the idea, one that's against it, and one that is neutral. Now, I think that's such a clever model. Wouldn't it be interesting if we did trials like that? So, for example, a school is talking about trying whole class feedback. So they're saying we're going to trial whole class feedback. Before we do that, we're going to ask for 3 people. We're going to ask for someone who's really keen to try whole class feedback, someone who's completely against whole class feedback, and someone who's ambivalent towards it, and then get them to test it out and then get back their honest feedback, because you've got the person who's going to cheerlead it anyway, but they might find problems. The person who's neutral would be swayed either way, and the person who's negative might see aspects of it that they like. Likewise, if there is a new initiative that the head wants to launch, is it not worth trying in 3 classes first? Someone who's for it, someone who's against it, and someone who's neutral, just so that the head teacher's got a really good idea of whether it's actually going to be valuable or not. I think it's a really sensible strategy and something that is worth exploring for the future. My last quote from this brilliant book is, it's actually a quote, and it's from Massimo Bottura. I don't know who that is, but it says, you should always keep the door open to the unexpected. And I think that's a really nice quote. Just really like it. I write quotes in my diary and I keep that one. I'm going to keep that one. And now it's time for a little canal walk in a little thing we call Reset Wood. Reset Wood. Now this isn't actually in a wood, but it's on a canal. So join me on the canal. Well, another walk. This time, if you can hear the traffic in the background, that's the joy of the M25. There's also a plethora of birds. And one of the things I would say is if you go out with your phone ever for a walk, of course you do, if you do that, before you go, I'd recommend an app called Merlin, Merlin, and Merlin is fantastic in terms of being able to identify birds purely by the sound. So you play it and it records the sound and identifies the birds in real time. Makes you look like a bird pro. Anyway, I'm aware last time that I was panting away like some sort of obese diabetic heart attack patient being prepped for surgery almost, and I could only apologise by my heavy breathing. I should have explored that more fully, but instead I've chosen to be a bit more careful about my breathing. I'm walking along a canal at the moment. Again, I live in outer London, So you have to seek out these places. Last time I was in the woods. This time I'm by the canal. Canals, of course, man-made rivers, essentially. Quite shallow, incredibly straight, quite flat. Brilliant for ambling along. They often take you to destinations, which is, kind of handy. I quite like it as a there and back. And there's something quite soothing about walking alongside water as well. It's strange, isn't it? The effect that different things can have, water can have, in terms of calming yourself, in terms of allowing yourself, got distracted by a bumblebee, to be distracted. How ironic that I got distracted whilst I was talking about distraction. But yeah, something very pleasant about the river and about the locks and the calm of that. It's interesting what we're drawn to, isn't it? I'm drawn to rain on the glass. I'm drawn to fires, the sea, rivers and river water, and just that stillness that I think we often crave in this manic, busy world where it feels like we're living on the precipice of chaos, and we can feel like we're on the edge far more than we perhaps should be in terms of mental health. We talk about mental health, but I think that this sort of walk can give you a mental wealth. And a book, obviously there's a book recommendation, a book that I have been reading this year, and I've been carefully pacing myself to read it. It's called 52 Ways to Walk, and it is absolutely superb and instructive in getting out once a week for at least 12 minutes and going for a walk. And each week there is a challenge, and I'm really careful to read one chapter a week and do the walk with my ever suffering family. And I'm suspecting that there will be at some point walk along a river, walk along a canal, and I'll be like, oh, yeah, I can nail that. Oh, now I've just seen a robin, and that's quite exciting. I tell you what, why? Because they're very communal birds. So if you ever see a robin, you can play the song of a robin from YouTube and they'll come closer to you. I've had one almost land on my hand. And I appreciate while I'm talking how completely sad I sound. But I'm hoping that you're enjoying this walk with me along the canal. And it's an open offer. If you're ever in southwest London, you fancy a walk along a canal, just give me a shout. Happy to do that. Always happy to meet a stranger. Struggle with small talk, but I'm happy to meet a stranger as an open offer on a radio station. Anyway, I should head back. Make sure that my breathing is normal on this recording rather than the ghastly drum or thrum that it was last time. My mission for you then, get that book, 52 Ways to Walk, and also enjoy that time by water, by the river, by a canal, by the sea.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out.
Thank you very much, John Catt, for sponsoring the Teachers Talk Radio network. Currently, they do some brilliant books. They've always got good offers, and I am being published by them, so I am incredibly supportive. Thank you very much, Teachers Talk Radio, for partnering up with John Catt, a brilliant publisher, very, very fast, very responsive, and very current to the thirst that people have in education at the moment for research, for quality reading materials, to draw us in on things. So I'm just going to cover the last part of the show. I hope that was interesting, by the way, the canal walk. The last part of the show with something that hopefully will resonate with others.
Old age teachers.
So I'm an old age teacher, an OAT, or an OAT. I've just realised that is. I'm an OAT. And this is something that I was thinking about recently, and it was how valuable a tool was that my teachers used when I was a child that you don't seem to see anymore. And I can't understand why, because this is a radio show. It's going to turn into a podcast. We've all got access to podcasts in our pocket now and on websites. And when I was a child, there were audio PE lessons, and they were brilliant, immersive soundscapes. And I don't understand why some genius hasn't created PE lessons, which are a podcast series where they record the session that you then play to the students. And it is a half-hour PE session. I think it'd be absolutely incredible. There's a huge, huge opportunity there for someone who's enterprising to create a podcast suite there. And I would also suggest that they turn it into a YouTube broadcast as well, because lots of people listen to YouTube, and some podcast broadcast systems might be blocked by schools. I don't know if any schools block YouTube. That's probably, is that classified as a hate crime, blocking YouTube in a school? I don't know. It's certainly a shame if they do that. But yeah, if anyone is keen to do that with me, because I just think it would be so useful. To give you the scene, it would be part of a continuum, a series of stories. Definitely had an educational aim to them, but they were like, let's say it was a movement session for gymnastics. The theme would be under the sea, and there would be music, water theme music, and the narrator would talk about going underwater, and you'd hear bubbles and that sort of thing, and it would describe fish and ask you to move like this, and it would have a small sound, a tone, I think they're called, which would play for the teacher to pause it and the teacher to restart it. So there's a chance for you to demonstrate things. So they were probably, in reality, only 15 minutes long, but they gave a very definite vibe to the lesson and were really, really supportive. And in terms of planning, how fantastic for a teacher to do one less thing and think about one less thing because it had all been planned as a recording. So I'm really keen to see those back if possible. I really like those ideas. I'm just going to finish my show with one feature that I did last time that I got a nice amount of feedback on, as in, a few people talked about it, and that is a reflection on an observation that I've had.
Observable.
So we've all been observed. It's the rule. It's the law. And I was saying to someone the other day that I think that teachers go one of two ways if they're being observed. They either raise their game and it's an all singing, all dancing festival of teaching, or they become incredibly anxious and stressed and nervous about it all, and hope that no one ever sees them doing this, and it's humiliating, and the tech breaks, and they become anxious balls of sweat. And that's not how observation should be at all. I'm going to talk about one observation that one of my heads gave to me. They were known for being particularly quick and incisive at identifying people's strengths and weaknesses with it felt like a glimpse of the lesson. They were incredibly fast at identifying anything that needed to be tackled and challenged, and they were known for making a summary assessment in maybe 5 minutes, if that. Really, really fast, really, really quick. And so when I heard that they were coming to see me, I thought, okay, I can do 5 minutes. That's absolutely fine. I can do 10 minutes. Absolutely fine. Also, not stressful, totally manageable. So they came into a maths lesson that I was teaching, and sat at the back. And I was teaching my maths lesson. I had a really good TA then, really supportive TA. And we were teaching the lesson. And I was sitting in with the children. It wasn't one of those lessons that I was at the front, as I recall. 10 minutes passed and 15 minutes passed, and she's still making loads of notes. And then 20 minutes passed, 25 minutes passed. Ladies and gentlemen, she was in there for an hour. One crisp hour. 60 minutes. And she thanked me at the end, and I went and saw her at lunchtime, and she was in a meeting. So I went and saw her at the end of the day, and she was in a meeting still. So I'm a bag of nerves by now. And she caught me just before she was left and said, Fred, I can't do feedback now. Are you free after school tomorrow? And I thought to myself, yes, because I'll have eaten myself alive in 36 hours. That's absolutely fine. Feel free. Yeah, perfect. Go for it. 36 hours. Totally fine. So I spent the night concerned, because if it had been 10 minutes and awful, I was not bothered, because that's correctable. That's a one-off. But an hour and then not to get feedback, you go to worst case scenario, don't you? So I was waiting for the feedback for 36 hours. Went to see her after school, and to give her credit, she gave me a full hour of her time in response, and described me as a bumblebee teacher. And she said, it was very complimentary actually. She said it was that she'd never seen teaching like it before, and didn't understand how it worked, and yet it did. She said at one point the children were doing 11 or 12 different things, and yet I was on top of what everyone was doing. I was still teaching, still maintaining control, still keeping an edge and energy to the lesson. And she went through and analysed the lesson, but she did start with that killer. How do you feel the lesson went, and what would you have changed? So I was honest and said that it wasn't my finest lesson, but it wasn't my worst lesson either. And I said that a regular good lesson in a sequence is a real strength, and she agreed. So it's very, very good feedback. So there's part of me that says there's a real benefit to having a quick, short, sharp shock observation, because it's very non-threatening. 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And in fact, there's a book called Leverage Leadership, which recommends that teachers are observed 5-10 minutes each week by their head teacher on one specific task. And I really like that model. But there's something for a really in-depth observation. It's difficult because teachers are so concerned about being observed, concerned about it and so worried about it. But I really think it's worth exploring in terms of the benefit that it can produce. I personally think that it was possibly one of my best feedback sessions. Like I said, it wasn't the best lesson. It wasn't the best lesson I've ever taught, but the feedback was really beneficial, really made me think. And I suppose the sign of that is that this was almost 10 years ago now, and I'm still thinking about it. Now tell me some feedback that you got 10 years ago that you still think about in terms of your career, because I can't think of many, but that is definitely one of them. Absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I will be telling you another story I was observed last week, and I'm not going to share that this time because I'm featuring in another podcast Kieran Mackey's Thinking Deeply About Mathematics, where I don't mention maths once, actually. I share that observation story then, so I'm going to hold out for the next time I do my show on here. But for now, I'm going to bid you farewell. My voice is feeling a bit sore now, so I'm going to play the outro music. Once again, thank you to Teachers Talk Radio and to John Catt for sponsoring the series. And if you've got any feedback for me, as I said, I'm Mr. Lockyer on Twitter, MRLOCKYER. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.